Hello, hello, hello. Let me know if you can hear me. It's good to see we got 15 likes already. That's pretty awesome. All right, guys. I see you all there waiting for you to say, yes, you can hear me, and then we will roll. There's always a slight delay here. Let me pop out the chat here. Loud and clear. Thank you, Stuart Braithwaite from New Zealand. Kia ora. All right, everybody. Let's do it. Thank you, Alistair. Thank you, Bruce, everybody. All right, let's do it, guys. Let's roll it down. And hello, everybody. Welcome to LFL episode number 93. And if you're about to post in there, are you still in lockdown? The answer is no. No, I'm not in lockdown. It's just a name. I just figured I would mention that since pretty much every week that's the first comment I get. All right. Good to see you all. All our regulars are in the house. Glad to see you all here. It's exciting. So today we are going to be doing part 2 of the Photoshop Essential Preferences. We did the first part 2 weeks ago, so if you guys missed that, jump on YouTube, photoshopCAFE. 2 weeks ago, you'll see Preferences Part 1. And I asked if you guys wanted a Part 2, and you said yes, you do. So we're going to do a Part 2 of that. And not here, Rod Shelley, Kansas City, you're not in KC anymore? Not here in KC anymore. I'm jumping into the middle of a conversation there. So anyway, guys, in the chat, if you're watching it live, drop your comments. There's a healthy chat going there. Introduce yourself if you're new, and everyone will welcome you. Bruce is in the house. He's our moderator. He's going to take care of everything. Get your drink orders in with him. And I've been told, too, on the comments that I talk too much. So I guess, I'm sorry if I talk too much. And so I'm not allowed to smile. I'm not allowed to talk. And oh, what else am I not allowed to do? I'm being disrespectful wearing my hat, too. I've been told that. So, anyway, now we got all that out of the way. I always love these. If you guys any of you run a YouTube channel, you'll know that the comment section is always fun. So, if you guys are watching after the live stream, you're not going to be able to participate in the live chat because that's happening between 1 and 2 Pacific time. You can comment in the comment section underneath, which I read all the comments, much to my pain. No, actually, most of the comments are actually very positive. You just get that 1 or 2, which is just, I guess that gotta have tough skin. All right, guys, let's go in. What do we learn if I don't talk exactly? That's the point. Some people don't want to learn. They just want to be shown. And you know what? And that's okay. I do tips on Tuesdays, and I do shorts. If you don't want me to explain stuff, just do it. Check out those shorter videos, particularly the shorts where I just in 1 minute I show you how to do stuff. If that's what you want, check those out. You'll see those in the shorts section at the bottom. If you want to hear longer explanations where we dive in, we explore, we kind of go a little deeper, that's what the live streams are for. If you don't like that, then stop watching the live stream right now and watch last Tuesday's tutorial, which is about 3 or 4 minutes. Every Tuesday I'll drop that kind of tutorial. So if you want that kind of content, check it out. But this is here is for the Cafe crew and the LFL crew. And all right, I should just make a recording of that, shouldn't I? Just play it back every week. All right. Not here to critique you, but to learn photography. Thank you very much. All right. I will get off my hobby horse now, and we'll get to the desktop. All right. Here we are on my desktop. Hopefully you can all see it. And if you have a question, of course, drop that into the chat. And Bruce, if I don't see it, Bruce will send it to me. And if I ignore Bruce, which I usually do, I will address it later. I'll try my best. All right, guys. Let's jump in. So if you guys remember last time, we jumped into the preferences and we got a little bit. We got through the general and I believe the interface, and then we just kind of jumped through some different things. All right, so let's go. And now we are going to go into the Workspace one, and let's see what we've got on here. Now, once again, we are probably going to take some explorations. We'll take some bunny trails, and hopefully I can drop some really good tips and stuff for you guys as I kind of remember them. People say, hey, I actually had someone the other day said, hey, you know more about Photoshop. You've forgotten more about Photoshop than I know. Well, I hate to break it to you guys, I've forgotten more about Photoshop than I know. So there you go. All right. So, all right, let's look under these options. My jokes are, that's the nice thing about the live stream. I can't hear people laughing or groaning at my bad jokes. So options, auto collapse, iconic panels. Okay, so these panels are not iconic because they're just amazing. They're iconic because they're just icons. Sorry. Let's talk about what that is. This is the same preference that we can do under the preferences. You'll see that's a thumbnail right now, and then they can just kind of pop out. So we can change those preferences by simply, going in here. We can collapse all groups, show groups, transparency, but this is essentially going to enable us to expand panels. When we click there, the panels will be shown like they are here. And obviously we get a lot of panels there, then things are hard to see. But there's two levels. There's the panel level. Then, I'm right-clicking by the way. We can choose the auto collapse. So what auto collapse will do is, let me collapse these, is say I'm going in and I'm using a panel like the brushes. Once I do that and I click back on the desktop, it closes the panel again. So it's kind of a nice housekeeping. If I turn the auto collapse off, I can go in here, I can grab my brushes or whatever I'm doing, click there, and notice as I'm clicking, the panel will now stay open. Let me just collapse that one there. All right, so we have the ability to automatically close it, auto collapse. There we go. And auto shows, I click on it, we can see it. All right, that's what those do. And I find them quite useful. So a lot of the time, let me reset my disk space. I've got the column minimum, and I explained this last week. Let me hit the reset column minimum, and this will take it back. So basically, I have layers, channels, and paths, and the properties panel. I like to have the libraries here, and sometimes I like brushes too. So let's choose brushes. For a lot of the work I'm doing is I'll have the brush settings in here as well, and I can just drag those in. I don't need brushes because brushes are available every time I hit the B key. And you click there, you basically have the brushes panel here. This will give you the same things. If you click on this icon, this will open or close the brush settings, and this is where you set up brushes to create cloud brushes and all kinds of different things where we set dynamics. If you're using a Wacom pen, this is where you're going to set all of that. So generally speaking, this is the workspace that I like to have. And the properties are context sensitive, so this will change depending on the tool I'm using. Notice as I use different tools or I select different layers with different things in here, they will change for different things. If I select a mask, for example, let's create a layer mask, that becomes the masks panel. So, you always have all of this happening in properties. So this is why I have properties showing. It's useful. Layers, channels, and paths. I don't use channels and paths all the time. They're useful, but they take up no extra space than having just the layers open. So it makes sense to have those open as well. And Bruce has got a question there. Let me see what he's saying. Rayo, can you put the panels on a second screen to free up space? Absolutely. And that's usually how I work. Obviously, when I'm streaming here, I'm just showing you one screen. I might even have a two-screen setup here. I don't, but sometimes I had, in the past, I set up a two-screen setup. And then I would just, by choosing these presets, I can actually remember where the panels are on the second screen as well. But it looks like a lot of the stuff I've been doing lately is recording, so I've been trying to keep everything on one screen. But absolutely, you can put the panels on a second screen, and it's a great way of working. So there's a lot of panels in here. They're under the windows. And most of these I don't need most of the time because you can do the same thing with keyboard shortcuts and different preferences on board. So anyway, let's go back to, our preferences panel here. So a lot of these preferences, as you saw, are going to be replicated in other places. For example, the auto collapse. These are the same settings. If you right click, see those settings here? There they are. And if I hit interface options, that's basically going to give me these interface options here. All right, and you can have a narrow options bar, and that will just save a little bit of space up here. It will just kind of push all this into one kind of a thing, and it saves a little bit of space, but not a ton. But that's kind of handy too. What else have we got here? Large tabs. These are the tabs. You can make these small or large. If I make these smaller, see how they go smaller like that? You can see that. There's no reason to have them large, but we do. Yeah, so, and then open document. Okay, let's move on. Let's go to the tools and keep my eyes on these questions. So one of the things I find, though, maybe those options, the workspace options here, using the narrow ones would be a good option if you're working on a machine with a limited resolution. I like to have them big right now because I'm recording, and also normally I'm working in a 4K resolution, so I'm not really too worried. But generally speaking, this vertical distance or this space is what you're really trying to preserve, because the panels on the side will take up a little space on the side, but sometimes your documents are not going to be so wide that that's going to affect you. But the height can definitely restrict how much you see of those documents. And so, you know, the other thing you can do is, if you're worried about these panels, just hit the tab key, and the tab key will enable you to keep working. And if you hit the shift tab, it will just hide the panels on the side. See that? So we can do that, or shift tab. So you can hide those panels doing that, or you can use the F key. And when we're in this first mode, notice that it compresses everything and it gives us a lot of working space. So hitting the F key once will reduce a lot of that space. And of course, if you hit it again, you get full screen, but it's harder to work that way. Although you can hit the tab key, and that will give you these tools again. Nice thing about this is if you hit the space bar, you can actually move your entire document. So if you're trying to maximize your working space, those can be useful. All right, so that's the preferences as well as some of the different things we can do inside of Photoshop. Let's go to tools. Tooltips. Tooltips are those things that show up, and like, you know, if you hover, it says determine whether to show tooltips in control and tools. So if you don't know what a tool is, you just hold it there, and then the tooltip will eventually appear. That's why sometimes you hear an instructor go, and I'm going to grab the eyedropper tool, which is the I key, because they're waiting for the tooltip to appear. I know it's the I key, but it's not going to appear because this is open. But if I go over there, then eventually, there we go. It's the I key. So those are the tooltips. Then there's the other set of tooltips, which I personally don't like, which is the rich tooltips. The rich tooltips are these little animations that show up. Now, these can be useful if you're maybe starting out in Photoshop and you're not really sure what, you know, the different tools do and different things like that. You can roll over, and, you know, when they're applicable, the rich tooltips will show up. But I know they're going to show up on these tools. And personally, I just find that they get in the way because I already know what they do. But they are useful to newer users. So I usually turn off the rich tooltips. I like to keep the tooltips on because sometimes it reminds me I might forget a keyboard shortcut, and I can roll over and that will remind me, and then I can try and commit that to memory. All right. Enable gestures. As if you were using a trackpad, that would be on a laptop, or maybe you've got a Wacom tablet like I have here, and you have touch enabled, or you're using the Magic trackpad or whatever the Apple calls it, or the equivalent. I'm sure there's Windows ones available. You can use those, and that will enable you to pinch to zoom and all those kind of things. So why would you turn that off? Because sometimes they get in the way, like two fingers, you're dragging things you don't mean to, or you're pinching and zooming and you don't want to, so you can have the option to have those on or off. Shift key for tool switch. That one there would be, oh, of course, yes. So when we go into the tools, so if you look under here, there's other tools underneath there. So if I hit the I key, it's going to select the eyedropper. Let me go to the brush. So I hit I for the eyedropper, but what about the other tools? Well, if I hit the shift key and then I tap I, notice I can cycle through the different tools that are hidden under there. So that's a good way to do that. And at any time you can go under here and you can reset the tool or reset all tools. Let's do that right now. So all my tools are reset. I'm going to change that point sample. 2 weeks ago, we talked about why you don't want that on just a point. Check that out if you want to learn about that. Okay, so that's what that'll do. Then under here, let's go back to our preferences again. Under tools, over scroll, flick planning, all this kind of stuff. Okay, so basically what this is if you are zoomed in and you're hitting the space bar and you push it, notice it keeps rolling like a pool ball or like a billiards ball. And then, you know, so this enables me to kind of do that kind of stuff. If you don't want that to happen, turn that off, and then when you release, it will just stop. So, and it will also stop when you get to the edge of that document using that other preference. Okay, what else we got here? That's the flick panel, blah, 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 blah. Double click launches mask. Oh, that can be useful too. So if you're working here and you're inside a different tool, and then I choose the mask, if I double click, so that say the properties panel is closed, and I need a properties panel, I can double click here and notice it opens the properties panel. But if I wanted it not to do that, let me show you another option. If you want to go into select a mask, if it's something you do a lot, this is quite useful. Okay, so with that on, I'm not sure if it needs a restart, but I double click. Yeah, and here we go. Now it's in the select and mask workflow where I can use this for cutting out things and making selections and all that kind of thing. So see that? We're in select and mask. So if you don't want it to do that, which I generally speaking, I don't want it to do that, then I have that preference set to. Here, and then when I double click, it's just going to open the properties panel. So if that properties panel is not visible, like it's not right now, I can double click, it'll open the properties panel, and I can drag it to the top here, and it's just going to be there now. So I prefer that option. So if you don't see the properties panel, you can double click and it will launch it. All right. So let's go under tools again and just checking these questions. Very good. All right. Awesome. What do we got here? Arrow keys, rotate brush tip. I don't know if you guys knew that, but you can use the arrow keys to rotate your brush, which is kind of useful. Blah, blah, blah. This HUD, that's the, you want to change the brush, and let me show you that. If you're in here, we're grabbing a brush, let's grab a pixel layer. And then I hold down the control option on Mac. I can change the size or the hardness. Softness will go up and down. Size will go left to right. Now I can change the opacity to if I want, but that's another set and preferences. So you can turn that one on or off. And so that's what that does. It's very useful. I do like that. And one of these very round brush hardness based on HUD vertical movement. That's what we're doing here. If I turn this off, I believe that's going to change it to opacity. There we go. So now I drag up and down. Instead of hardness, it changes opacity. Now, what I could do is put that back because I prefer to change hardness. Now, if you're working and you do want to change the brush, left and right bracket keys will change the size of the brush. Add the shift key and you can actually change the softness. If you look at that, just look at the up in the top left. Holding the shift and the right bracket key will make it hard. Shift right bracket key will make it that's how you vary the hardness or the feathering on the edge. As far as opacity, you don't really need that. You can just tap a number key. Notice now we're at 50% opacity because I hit the 5 key. 1 key will give us 10%. 8 key will give us 80%. Increments of 10. If I want to reset 100, just tap 0. And of course, if you want to do a smaller increment, like say 55, you just type in 55. Now, if I want to change that in the flow instead, let me put that to 0. Just hit the shift key. 5 will give me 50%, 0, 100%. Works the same way. So I don't really feel the need to use the HUD to change the opacity because I can very easily change that just by tapping a number key, but I do like to be able to change the hardness. Now, if you're on Windows, it's Option right drag. Well, actually Alt right drag because there's no option on Windows. Okay, let's go back to the preferences, And the tools, arrow key, you know, so you can understand that one. Hit left arrow key, right arrow key. You can change the brush, rotate the brush. If you hold down the shift key, it will do it 10 times faster. So that means if you need to rotate the brush faster, hold down the shift key and the arrow key, release the shift, and then it will go slower. If you want to go even slower, hold down the Alt or the Option key. I'll show you how this works using any scrubby slider. Scrubby sliders up here works the same way. If I drag, it changes the amount. If I hit the shift key, it changes it 10 times faster. If I hold down the Alt or the Option key, it changes it 10 times slower. So this gives you precision. So that works the same thing with that brush when you're rotating the brush. Let me show you a brush. Since we're here, why not? Let's grab a brush that has a shape on it so we can see this. I don't know, let's do the crosshatch, which I love doing for shiny, sparkly things. See that? Let's make that white. Ding! You know, put that on the tooth and you're going to make the sound, you know, ding! All right, so if you want to change the rotation of that brush, then hit the, oh wow, I've changed the brush itself. That was interesting. I hit the wrong arrow key. But then you hit the arrow key and notice that the brush is now rotating. See that? And I can go that way. Just to prove it, hold down the shift key and watch the brush faster. And if it goes faster and faster and faster, I can start mining for cryptocurrency. I'm joking. All right, moving on. Let's see what else we've got here for preferences. Now that we've explained those, hopefully there's something useful coming out of this. Let me know if any of this is useful for you guys. 1 hour in Photoshop turns into 4 hours in a matter of minutes. It definitely does. Photoshop can. You can get lost inside of Photoshop. There's so much we can do. What do we got here? Arrow keys, rotate, snap vector, blah, blah, blah. Show reference point when using transform. I'll show you that one. I just want to look at a couple of these. Zoom with the scroll wheel, animated zoom. Okay, so all of this is, if I turn on the scroll wheel, let me just show you a few of these. Scroll wheel zoom. Now I zoom in and out. But I find that can be annoying sometimes, so let me just show you under that preference. So we're going to kill two birds in one stone. Let's turn this one off. Zoom with scroll wheel off. Now I'm hitting the scroll wheel. It's scrolling. If I hit the Alt or the Option key, I can still zoom. So I like to turn that option off because I can do it anyway by holding Alt or Option. And yeah, and you can also scroll using the scroll wheel or hit the space bar to move things around. All right. So another one of those I saw and I just forgot it as quickly as I saw it that I was going to show you was the transformation values. Yeah, we kind of, some of this is pretty self-explanatory. So zoom resizes windows. So right now, you know, when we zoom here and we're in Windows, let me show you here. So let's go under there. And we zoom, notice it zooms in and out. Now, if you wanted to zoom the size of the window itself, you turn that option on and you can make the windows bigger or smaller. And I can just drag that up and dock it. That's another preference. All right, let me show you another preference, which we're going to get to in a second. And that is going to be kind of useful for you guys. A lot of people don't know about this. Spring-loaded keys. This was a JDI that Adobe did in... I'm going to think it's a while ago now. When they first introduced that as a JDI, it would have been about maybe Photoshop CS5, CS6 maybe. CS5 perhaps is when they did JDI keys, which are spring-loaded keys. What does that mean? So if I'm in the Move tool, let me create just an object here, like a, I don't know, let's create some kind of a shape. And I'll create a new layer. Let me grab that layer, drag it near the top here. Oh, actually, I don't need to do all that. There's a layer here. Let me just grab this. Okay, so I'm moving this around. Well, let me grab this one. It'd be more fun. All right, there we go. So I'm moving this around. And I need to paint. But I want to go back to my Move tool. So what I do is I hold down the B. And this takes me to the brush key. And of course, we've got the sparkle brush. So I can drop these sparkles on here. I haven't released the B key yet. Watch the toolbar. I release the B key. It takes me back to the previous tool. In this case, it was the Move tool. Okay. Well, what if I want to sample? Well, I hold down the I key for the eyedropper. Use the tool. Select the foreground color. Release goes back to the previous tool. If you don't believe me, let me hit the I key. I just tap it now, and I'm no hands. So now we're in the eyedropper. I want to brush. Hold down the B for the brush tool. boom, boom, boom. Release goes back to the eyedropper tool. So the spring-loaded keys will take you back to that previous tool. So that's useful if you want to temporarily switch to another tool. Hold down the key for that tool, use the tool, and then release, and it will spring-load back to the previously selected tool, not necessarily just to the move tool. So that's a really useful option, and that's one that you can turn off in the preference. By default, it's on. Let's go to the next set of tools. It's one of these. All right, so let's go to the history log. History log is really interesting. Now, have you ever wondered, how you do something, or maybe you're writing tutorials, or maybe you want to create actions, and you want to do something? Okay, so let's do something interesting here. Let's choose the history log, and you can save metadata, text file, whatever. We'll do a text file, and we're going to do the Photoshop edit log here, and we're going to hit save, and click OK. All right, so we're doing a new session. So why don't we just choose File, Open Recently, and it's open this image. And say I want to do an effect, a slide sandwich effect. Control J will duplicate it, change it into overlay blending mode, and then add a blur. If you didn't keep up, it doesn't really matter what I was doing. It's more just a matter, I just want to do something. But in case you do care, duplicate the layer, change the blending mode to overlay, doubles the contrast, go into filter blur, grab that blur, and then you want to get this kind of hazy effect, and then just reduce the opacity and just kind of dial it in a little bit. What it does is it gives a boost of color contrast, and it creates kind of a soft effect, kind of like what you would get by putting a stocking over a lens when you were shooting film in the 80s. All right, so we've done that. Great. That's wonderful. Okay, so what happens if I want to see what happened here? Well, we're going to open that log file now. So let me go to my desktop. And I'm trying to think the easiest way to get to my desktop is going to be, you think that would be something I'd know how to do? Hit the Finder. Where are you, Finder? Are you over there on the other screen? That's why. So I'm going to go to the desktop, and I'm going to drag this. And just for privacy, I'm not showing the whole desktop, but I'm going to find that text file. There it is. Photoshop Edit. So what happens if I double click this? It opens it up. File opened. I guess I didn't close the file, but that shows the log. And if I hit Control S to save it, and I save that. Oh, hang on. No. I don't want to do that. Save as. Let me save it somewhere else because I don't want to overwrite my other thing. Let's hit the desktop over here. Hit save. Awesome. All right. And well, I guess I have to finish the session. So if I finish the session and close Photoshop and reopen it, it's going to give me a list of the things I did. But let's not do that. I think you can take my word for it. Okay. So let's go on and let's continue. So that's a good way to keep a tab of everything that you do. Yeah, log items by session only. So until I close that session, it's not going to create that log file, finish creating that log file. All right, but let's turn that off because I don't want to do that every time I'm working. But it can be useful if you're experimenting and you want to create a tutorial maybe out of the end result. Try some different things, and then it will give you that list there. All right, and once again, they can be used when you're scripting and stuff like that. File handling. Image previews. Always save, never save, ask when saving. Image previews, I have it set to always save as a thumbnail. Now, this doesn't always work on the Mac. But sometimes when you're looking for those thumbnails of your images and you see it just shows a file name and it doesn't show a thumbnail, make sure these are turned on. And if you open them and resave them when you upgrade your operating system in a Mac, because I know someone had an issue with this, it might bring back those thumbnails. So if you're opening a file and it just shows a PSD document and you want to actually see the thumbnail, turn image previews to always save and thumbnail. So what that preview will do as well is it will create that thumbnail. So if you're not seeing it, try doing that, and hopefully that will help. File extension up at lowercase. Just keep that. All right. So when you're saving an image, you can save it back to save as to an original folder. Okay. So this is whole save as thing. Okay. Let's talk about this. This is something that was causing problems with people when Adobe choose File, Save As. Now, what happens is when I choose Save As, look, I can't save it as a JPEG. It gives me limited options. So sometimes you're like, I need more options, so I'm going to save it as a copy. And now as I save it as a copy, oh, wow, I have all these options. I can create all these different types of file formats now. So this was something that was changed by Adobe. I can save it to the cloud or I can save it to the desktop. But here we go. So now I can save it. I can embed my color profile or whatever, and it's going to give it a name. Now, by default, this will change this, and it will say value 3 copy now, which can be annoying. So let's look under here. So this is what changed. Now we have control over this. So if you want to just save as before, just enable legacy save as, and it will go back to how it always was. I'm turning this off because I like the option to be able to choose different file formats and different things like that, but I don't want it to say copy in the file name, so I turn that off. You probably have it off by now. So that means when you go to choose save as, it's always going to give it the file name and then append it with copy on the back on the name. So we're changing it. So that's what all of that is. If you have never dealt with it, don't worry about it. Just leave it as it is. If you find that annoying, now we have a solution. But we have talked about that before, particularly when that came out, which was, I believe, Q1 of this year. They had an update where they did that. And this is why, John, this is why I watch the replays every week. Oh, okay. Oh, Tracy watches the replays. Yeah, I need to watch the replay. I've spent so much time on the chat. I missed it. Oh, so you guys are distracted chatting. You're not even listening to me. Okay, I see how you are. Okay, I'm just going to take a glass of water while you do that. It's okay. If the chat's more interesting than me and that's why you came, good. That's a good thing. Good question, Rayel. So Rayel has got a question. What's the difference between JPEG and JPEG 2000? JPEG 2000 is just a different file format, so it's a newer JPEG version. So it has, I believe it enables you to have 16-bit files, I think. It's not something I really use, but it's a newer JPEG format, but it's not like heavily adopted. So, if some software, supports it, it's a good file format to have. But there's a newer one coming. I forget the name of it. You probably, someone smarter than me will post that in there, because that is there's a better format, which is actually going to be smaller than a JPEG. And I believe Apple has a version of it. Microsoft has a version of it. Adobe now supports it. I just forget the name of it. But that gives you 16-bit files. It gives you lossless compression. So it's a more modern format for a delivery format. And, that will be more ubiquitous later in the future. It's coming up. So why don't you use legacy save as? Because when I use legacy save as, it goes back to how it was. And I like some of the newer options that I want to be able to, I want to be able to save it as, just some of the options. Some of the options that come here. Let me go back here. We'll choose let me show you the legacy save as, and I'll show you. I do have a reason, but my brain right now is not working. Let's go legacy save as. We'll click on here, click OK, and we choose File, Save As. So save as gives us the option to choose any format. And and it works quite nicely. But then if I want to make a copy of it, I have to choose save as a copy, and then I can save it. Whereas the new one, I can just save a copy automatically. Or is that under here? Save a copy. Now I can save a copy here. I don't know. Let me go back to there. There's a reason that Adobe changed it, and there's a reason I'm using it. And for the life of me, can't remember right now. So let's have a look. Let's turn that off. It might be because it enables me to do that copy automatically. Let's have a look. File, save as. And then I click here for save a copy. I have a reason. I will tell you next week. I literally don't even remember why, but I do remember that I found it better to do it that way. And if someone else can remember why I told you a few weeks ago, I literally do not even remember. Maybe it lets me save a second one or something. I forget. Sorry, guys. I literally do not forget. I do not remember, but I just know that to do not and then do not append a copy is working the best. All right, moving on. File compatibility. And if you remember, please tell me in there. I think the save as changes is so that you can't accidentally overwrite your original file. I think that's probably, it forces you to save a copy. I think you're right there, Victor. Yeah, that's exactly what it is. Yes, because it only gives you, you know what, I remember now. So what it does is that if you're working in a, I remember exactly now. So if you're working with a layered file like here, and you've got a bunch of files, and then you choose File, Save As, and then I click in here, and if I had the option for JPEG or something like that, I could accidentally save it out as a flattened file and lose my layers, whereas having to do it that way where it forces me to save a copy because I can't choose those flattened versions because PSD, you know, these all support layers, so I'm not going to accidentally flatten my image when I'm working. So thank you for that little reminder. That's exactly why. So you don't accidentally flatten your layered files. All right, let's go down here, file handling. Now we've got Camera Raw preferences here. These are the same preferences you will find inside of Camera Raw. If you click here, notice it opens them up, and here's the Camera Raw preferences. Exactly the same as you'll find inside Camera Raw. All right. Then file compatibility. Prefer Adobe Camera Raw for supported RAW files. So that means when you double click a RAW file, it's going to open it in, say, ACR instead of it opening in, you know, Capture One or whatever else you might have there. All right. Let's have a look here. Now, so if you're working in HDRs and you go to convert your images, so say you're working a 32-bit image, I'll show you here something under the image mode. This is not an HDR, but say it was a 32-bit floating point HDR image, and I want to convert it. So you go under image mode, and then I choose 16-bit. It's just going to flatten it down. Now, when you're working in the tone mapping tools, if you want to go through Camera Raw before it flattens, so when you're doing the tone mapping and you want to do that in Camera Raw, turn on that option for Camera Raw, and then when you do that adjustment, it will go through Camera Raw and enable you to set your, it's just basically a way to set your levels, because when you're working in a 32-bit image, it gives you more headroom, or you're able to do things with images that are not supported in 8 and 16-bit images. So really, for this to work, I should really be doing an HDR image. I've done other tutorials on it. You can find those there that I've done where I go more in depth on that. And then a lot of the time you'll be using the tools inside of Photoshop when you're converting it. And so that will give you the option to use the different tone mapping algorithms. But whereas Camera Raw actually works nicer than some of those older ones. So let's go back here. So if you turn that on here, when you do your conversion from 16 to 8-bit or whatever, you know, from 32 to 16 or 8-bit, so when you're working with those HDRs and you want to squeeze them down, you want to make sure the colors are right, you want to do your tone mapping, it'll enable you to do it in Camera Raw, which works better than those other options. All right. So let's have a look under here, or more realistically, should I say. You can use other ones if you're going to go with an OpenEXR. But anyway, I'm not going to talk about all that. Okay, so ignore EXIF profile tag, blah, blah, blah. Let's look at anything that could be useful. Ask before saving a layered TIFF file. I don't even know why I have that on. Because, you know, you're going to choose File, Save As, or just Save, and then I want to save this as something, and it's a TIFF. Let's change it to a TIFF. And I click Save. It's going to give me this thing, you know, click OK. Include layers, yes or no. And so that's what that preference does, is it shows that. And if I click Don't Show Again, what that does is it turns that preference off. Let me show you that. So notice that ask before, actually that should have been turned off when I turned that preference. I guess on restart it probably would have. So this is useful if, say for example, you work with, a good example would be you work with PSDs as your working files, or PSBs for the larger files, and then you like to use your TIFFs for printing. So generally speaking, you can, and I do this a lot, I'll keep all my layered files as PSDs, and in the print files, I want them to be lossy, so I'm going to use that TIFF, and then it's just going to tell you, oh, you're working, this is going to save it with layers, so it's a layered file and it's not going to be a flattened file. So it's not going to flatten it, but what it's going to do is it's just going to let you know that it's a layered TIFF. So if you're working that way, it works also if you're working with software that maybe doesn't support layered TIFFs, and it's just going to kind of remind you. So when you see that, you're like, oh no, maybe I should save this as a PSD instead. So if that's how you like to work, you can save it as a PSD for your layered files, and you can save it as a TIFF when you flatten them. Now, there's not a big difference between TIFF and PSD anymore. Adobe actually owns the TIFF file format now, and it is actually very, very similar to a PSD. So a Photoshop TIFF supports almost every feature that's supported inside a PSD, just so you know. So it supports a lot of their layers and adjustment layers, all those kind of things are now supported inside a layered TIFF. So there's not a huge difference between a layered TIFF and a PSD anymore. Used to be back in the day. All right, so moving on. What do we got here? Compression. So, if you want, you can save your files with different LSZ compression and different types of or JPEG compression. So you can compress your PSD and your PSB files if you want. It'll save space, and some of the compression is actually quite good, and you're not going to notice a reduction of quality. But what it is going to do is it's going to take longer for you to open and close those files. And because I'm working on a RAID hard drive, space is pretty small when I'm working on images, even though some of my images could be 10 gigs. But that's just nothing compared to what I'm working with in video. So I'd rather have more space and not compress those files and be able to work faster. PSB and file compatibility. What this does is it embeds a preview, a full resolution composite layer. I mentioned this 2 weeks ago, but I didn't necessarily remember exactly where it was. So what this does is when it asks for that compatibility when you go to save that file, if you choose yes for compatibility, it's going to create a layered file. And the reason it wants that layered file is if you're opening inside earlier versions of Photoshop that may not support all those features, it can still reproduce that image. If you're working in other software that doesn't support some of those features or maybe some of those layers or some of those different things, when you have that compatibility turned on, that composite layer is going to enable it to work. And programs like InDesign and other applications. So it's just going to enable your file so it can fall back on that flattened composite file if it can't support all the layers. So it just means it's just going to work on more things. All right. Cloud documents is if you want to save to the cloud by default. And first time you opened a new version of Photoshop, you probably saw it. You could save to the cloud, you could save to the desktop, and this is where you can change that option. Now here's something that is very useful, if not all of that's useful. Someone says I'm hiding a prompter under my desk. That would be awesome. Because then I wouldn't forget things so much. But anyway, so at least a recent file list contains 100 files. I think by default that's 25, and I don't know why. Why is it 25? So that means when I choose file and then I choose open recent, is 25 of my last images. I mean, unless I'm trying to hide something from someone, which maybe some people are doing. 100 is the maximum. I'd go more if I could, but then I choose file, open recent, and boom, it's a longer list. Why wouldn't I want that longer list? I have no idea why they make that 25 by default. If it could go to 200, I would. However, if you close all your documents, and we did talk about this last week, we do have the recent file list here under this big window, and we can see those are the recent files I've worked with. And this is nice. I'm actually starting to like this, which is why I now keep it on. I used to turn it off, and now I turn it on. It just makes it easier to find things. Okay, so let me just show you once again. That was an option, just in case you forgot. That was the auto show home screen under general. Oh, by the way, if you know where you're going under preferences, we're going to choose file preferences, and notice I'm going directly to where I want to go. So I'm choosing the file handling. It opens the same preferences. It just goes further down on that list. You can open it at general, just open it and then click on there. It doesn't matter. Okay. So anyway, now we've got that. let's go to the next one, export. We're in the export one, so quick export. So that is, if we want to do this and we choose file, export, and a quick export is a PNG. So that works nicely when you're working with video, and you want a lossless file. Works good when you're working with transparency. If I was posting to Facebook or something like that, I wouldn't use that. I would change this to JPEG. And I'd set that quality to about 75. 75 is a good balance between file size and quality. You go any larger than 75 on a JPEG, and it's just making the file a lot bigger without really seeing any difference visually. Once you hit 80, you're going to be, I don't know, you're going to have to be like an eagle to see the difference at that point. So when you're sharing things like Facebook, you want a little bit of compression to make the file size smaller. I find 75 is a perfect balance between quality and file size. I got a question coming in there from Bruce. Let's see what the Bruce is loose. What have we got here, Bruce? Is there a way to delete previews from the home screen? There is not. I wish there was, because I actually had some stuff. I was working with a client that was, so funny you ask that, that was sensitive. When, celebrity client, you just, everything I do with that particular client is private. I do not want, it's nothing bad. It's just they don't like people seeing what you're working on. So I literally, that's why I've got all these drone images right now, because I literally just opened 100 images before I did the live stream to push the sensitive stuff down so you guys wouldn't see it. So that's the hack around it. Andrew, glad you could join us. Welcome to the party. All right, so export location. So ask where to export each time. Or I can choose a assets folder next to the current document. So that would mean every document, you would see a little assets folder when you hit the quick export, which might be the way you want to work. And then it'll create a new folder, and those exported JPEGs or PNGs or whatever you chose. In this case, now we're doing JPEGs, will be saved in that little folder tucked away, or we can do it each time, and then I can just hit save and then just keep saving them into the same location or wherever I want them to go. So those have pretty good, depending on your workflow, both those options are quite useful. Quick export metadata. So you can have no metadata or copyright contact information. I'm very upset with this because there's one other option that is missing, and that is all. Sometimes I want to export that with all the metadata. Why would I want that? Well, if I'm working on a 360 file, or I want to convert it to a 360, like even a Facebook 360, although a lot of that does pick it up in the algorithm. But what I want to do is sometimes I want to inject a camera's metadata in there. They know it's a 360 camera. They can see that metadata. And then when you upload it, it's going to turn it into a 360 panorama because it's going to know. This strips that information out. So for that option, it's, you can either have no metadata or copyright contact information. So I would like to see another option that has all for that. And yes, I've told Adobe that. So, all right. So there's the other option here is export, convert to sRGB. Why do you want to convert it to an sRGB? Because it gives you compatibility. When you go to export, in fact, if you go under the file, watch this. If we go under the legacy way of doing this, export save for web, which by the way, if you want to keep all the metadata, this is the way you want to go, because metadata, I can choose all. Okay, so anyway, just on the side. But if we look under here, it might make it easier to understand some things. So we chose the format, the JPEG, we gave it the file. So this just kind of skips this window. That's what that does. And then, it just enables us to do that. But what was I talking about? Quality, progressive, optimized. Oh, here we go. Yes, embed, convert to sRGB. So if you have this option off, it can save it to a different RGB space. sRGB is the most ubiquitous. It's 216 colors that are somewhat exactly the same across different computers. So that's the web safe. sRGB is obviously more colors than the 216 colors, but those 216 colors are included in sRGB as well as more colors, but it's a smaller color gamut, meaning a smaller amount of available colors. And by reducing it there, if a color's out of gamut, it's not going to be managed. So that means it could turn into something very unexpected on certain monitors. If you have it pushed down or it just shifts the colors to the closest in that small space, The other monitors are, the colors are all going to be supported, and so there's not, it's just going to be, it's not going to give you as many colors available, but it's going to give you a more consistent and a more reliable preview across different monitors and different systems. Otherwise, it could look very, very different between computers. So that's why we would do that. And because it's a delivery format, you know, like you're not working, you shouldn't be working in sRGB. It's a delivery format, so it doesn't really matter when you're losing those different colors, as long as your main one, you're working on a larger one like Adobe RGB, which supports more colors, or ProPhoto. If you're working in 16-bit space, you want to work in ProPhoto RGB. If you're working in an 8-bit space, then Adobe RGB. If you don't know what I'm talking about, let me show you quickly. Under image mode, this is where, you know, some images will be 8 bits and will be 16. Your camera might capture in 16-bit. You might be working in Camera Raw in 16-bit. Now, when you go to print it, you're probably going to drop it back to 8-bit. When you put it into a JPEG file, it's automatically going to convert to an 8-bit, which is why you want that sRGB. It's going to make sure that it manages those colors, or at least you're going to lose a little bit of color, but it's going to be reliable and consistent. Now, we can work with different color spaces under here. When we go under, you know, assign profile, convert to profile, you'll see, you know, destination space. There we go. There's where you set the Adobe RGB or ProPhoto. P3 is very similar to an Adobe RGB as far as the amount of colors it supports. ProPhoto RGB is the biggest, and Rec 709 is for video. So yeah, maybe someday we'll go into thing on, let me show you where those settings are. We're not going to do the whole color management thing now, but maybe one day we will. If we go into color settings, this is where you can set them. Your working space is set here. Why do I have this set to sRGB as my working space? Because right now, the JPEGs I'm creating are going on social media. So I'm saving them for Facebook and Instagram, things like that. So sRGB is going to work nicely for that. Now, if I'm doing print, I'm going to change that. Once again, 16-bit, ProPhoto, 8-bit, Adobe RGB. All right, so there we go. We got a extra little Adobe color management thing in here, no extra cost. All right, let's move on quickly. Did we get a question? Let me see here. I did feel a question is coming. Maybe I answered it. If you clear recent file list, will that stop previews on the home screen? Just curious. I don't believe it will. Why does your max quality show as 58 and your export to web? Oh, because it's not tied to it. So this one is the quick export as. So if we look under here, so let me do the this is quick export. So quick export, and once again I have to restart before that changes to a JPEG, but that's the same as choosing export as. This is it here, export as. And this is a quick export that skips this dialog box. When we choose file export, say for web, this is using a separate system, so I can change this to whatever I want. And I can actually look at two up here, so I can see it before and after. So 100% quality, you see no difference. If I take this to 0%, you'll see the difference. In this case, I'm not seeing a huge difference, but let's change this preset to JPEG low. There's 10 quality. Okay, so we're not seeing it a lot here. It's probably not the right image, but you'll see, you know, the loss. I can see a little bit in the trees. Maybe something a little crisper would be better to work with text or something like that. But anyway, that's where you're going to be saving it, so it's separate. All right, so let's look at the next question, and I think I skipped the other question. If you clear the recent file list, will that stop that? That's an interesting thing. So let me see that. That is a good question. The recent file list inside of Photoshop. Let's have a look. Preferences, general. Let's go down to file handling. All right. So is there a place to clear the recent file list inside of Photoshop? That's a good question. Would that be under Purge? I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but if somebody knows that, let me know. Because it's not something I really do, but that could be a good option. Just looking for that. And I'm going to look at the comments in a second. If some of you knows as under Purge, no. Where is that? Is there? Click File, Open Recent, Clear Recent. Okay, thank you for that. File, Open Recent, and then there's a Clear Recent at the bottom, huh? Okay, let's try that. Close this out. Wow, look at that. You are a genius. Okay, thank you for that. All right, so the Genius of the Year Award goes to Ray L. Thank you for that. I'm actually going to probably steal that and do a tip on that. That is brilliant. Thank you for that. All right, see, we can all learn, including me. All right, thank you for that. So let me just reiterate what happened when you are going into Photoshop and you're in this window and you want to clear all of those images out. That's how we do it. We go into File, Recent, File, Open, sorry, File, Open, Recent, which we don't have because I haven't opened any. Okay, let me just hang on. File, Open. Let's just open something here. Let's open this one. Okay, anyway, so that is excellent. Thank you for sharing that. I find that very useful. I have to, okay. All right, looks like we're just about out of time. Let's race through the ones that we haven't touched on that might be important. So let's go into the performance. Under preferences here. Performance is really interesting. Okay, so here we are under the performance. So we can set the history and cache, you know, and I would say if you're working on really large images, choose this. If you're working on web and small images, choose that, or default photos, which is going to work for most people. Notice the big thing that's changing here is the cache levels. As you're working on smaller files, it's going to be smaller cache levels. Larger files are going to give larger cache levels and larger tiles. So if you're working and you see those redrawing, so caching is just remembering what's on the screen when you change things, and it just like updates, and you'll see it update in blocks and stuff like that. So I would just set those for whatever you're using. Now RAM, depends how much RAM you've got here. Generally speaking, I like to give Photoshop, I mean, I've got a ton of RAM on here, as you can see. So if you don't have a ton of RAM, you can increase this, and this will give Photoshop more RAM, but you always want to leave a little bit for your operating system. If you don't have a lot of RAM and you want performance, turn it up, you know, maybe 80 or even 90 if you need it, and that will give Photoshop more. But what you want to do if you're running very high, don't run any other programs at the same time. If you're going to be wanting to run other programs at the same time and you don't have enough RAM, you're probably going to have to drop that down a little bit, and that will free up the memory to work on other programs. If you have enough RAM, you know, and I would say, you know, you got like 128 gigs, absolutely. You know, 64 gigs, probably not going to be a problem. 32, maybe you run into some problems with that. So depending, you might be okay. 16 gigs of RAM, but when you're in the 8 and 16 gigs, you're definitely going to be maybe struggling with that. So you can allocate that memory, but make sure you never want to go to 100, because that doesn't really give the background programs, including your operating system, much to work with. So you got to watch that. Okay, so the other one is graphics processors. When you're having problems, turn off that, and then you can see if you're getting the display problems like blocky things and things like that, and turn it back on. You're going to want to have that on for things like the HUDs and different things like that. They're going to require it. Now we've got an advanced setting. So what's interesting here is, did I reset this under 3D? Okay, I reset it, but the 3D settings are actually not even going to be, they're going to be grayed out. And if you want to ungray out those, what you do is go to Performance, go to Advanced here, turn off OpenCL, and that will enable it to work with OpenGL if it's supported. And that will give you a little bit more control under your 3D if you're having problems with that. Now I also have another video where I showed you guys with that, you know, because Adobe's sunsetting it. So if by default you're going to see that that's all going to be grayed out. you're not going to be able to change any of these. But change that setting there, and you will be able to. So I'm going back here. I'm going to use OpenCL again. So you'll have that option. Also notice here, you have the 30-bit display. You can turn that on or off if you have that option. And that can be quite nice. Now there's another setting under your operating system if your screen's looking really weird, which is an HDR. If you don't have an HDR display and it's looking really, really weird, go turn that HDR option off. And let me show you this if you're on Apple and you're having problems with this. Displays. And see this high dynamic range? You turn that on. I'm not going to do it, but it can make things look really weird if you're not using an HDR monitor. All right, so those are those basic settings here. Scratch disks. Let's talk about scratch disks and then we'll end. So maybe you're getting an error. It says scratch disk full. What does that mean? So these are the drives that are attached to my computer. When you're working on your machine, the fastest thing is memory is RAM, random access memory. So, of course, when we're working on an M1 chip, it's just going to be memory. It's shared memory. So that is going to be the fastest way for it to work. So that means, when you load up a program, all of that information loads into RAM, and then you run your filters and stuff. It runs off what's in RAM, and then when it caches it, it updates that. And that's how it works quickly. Now, when it runs out of RAM, then what happens is it switches away. It's like we don't have enough memory. Let's go to the scratch disk. So the scratch disk is the hard drive, because the hard drive is the next memory. And notice here, I have this drive set and the other one. The Mac 2 I have set first. That's an NVMe drive, so it's a very fast drive. So you want to be using an SSD or an NVMe or a fast drive if you can, and you'll get better performance on scratch disk. If you don't turn on the scratch disk, well, it's just going to run out of memory when it runs out of RAM, and it's going to give you an out of memory message. If the drive fills up, because what happens is Photoshop will start to write, and sometimes they'll use 10 times the size of the file, that your actual file, in order for it to have all this open and work in memory. So it'll move that stuff backwards and forth to scratch disk a lot. And then when your drive fills up, it'll give a message saying scratch disk is full, and it won't let you save your file. It won't let you run the filter. So you can go in here, you can add other scratch disks. Notice I've only got the two very fast drives, an SSD and an NVMe. I'm not using any external drives as scratch disks. I could, but they're slower, so I don't want to use those. And notice the startup disk is not my primary. I'm starting a different one as my primary scratch disk, meaning it will use that one first in that order. You can drag them around here to change the order. But you don't want to use, if you have a secondary drive that's fast, don't use your primary because that's running your operating system and all the other stuff. Use the secondary, which is not going to have as much going on, and it'll just give you better performance by keeping that separate. Now, if your scratch disk is full and you can't get out, you can go under the Edit, and then we'll go down to the Purge menu here. And once you've been working, it'll save things. When you remember how I always told people to drag and drop things rather than copy them? Let me show you here for an example. Let's open this. And I drag and drop this in here. And then I go up under Edit, and then I choose Purge. Notice the clipboard's still empty. So this is why I work this way. I see people work this way, and it makes me cringe. Control A, Control C. So I've got this, and I've copied it, and now Control V, I paste it in here. Awesome! It got there. But now watch under the Purge menu. Edit, Purge. Notice clipboard is now available. That means I copied this to the clipboard, and now that's in memory. It's using memory, the size of that image I just worked with. When I dragged it, it bypassed the clipboard, saved system resources. When I got it, now it's in there. But now I can clear it just by clicking Purge Clipboard. So watch this. If I hit Control V, I can paste this again. If I choose Edit, Purge Clipboard, it takes it out of the clipboard. And now I hit Control V, nothing's going to paste because it's not in memory anymore. So I freed up that memory. So you can do that, when you're a scratch disk and you're trying to save the file and you're like, what do I do? You hit Purge, but also the history state is going to remember. That has to, the history is undo, redo, all of that is going to be there. So, and video cache if I'm working video. So a lot of the time I'm just going to go here and I'm just going to hit all. and then that will clear everything out, and it will enable you to save that file and then clear up space on that hard drive, and then you can use that as a scratch disk again, move things to a different drive. So all right, so hopefully all that is useful to you guys. We've kind of hit our time. Oh, I had pictures I want to show you. You know what? For those of you who want to hang out for a little bit, I'm going to show this week's pictures. For those of you who are got to go, ciao. But we'll just do this just really quickly. I'm going to go through here. I've got a few images that you guys posted on Facebook, on our Facebook group this week. So Leo Lu, beautiful photo of this tiger. Love it. All right. Boba. Love this. Great picture. John Schultz, ready to ride. I really like this. This is cool. We've got this. I just like the feel of this. You know, we've got our woman here with her penny fathering, and then the line art in the background. It's kind of cool. I think that's a neat piece. Nicely done. Good taste there. All right, and this one here. Another one from Leo. I just like the piece. This is a very calming kind of an image. Warren, are you here, Warren? Let us know if you are. I love your photograph stuff that you're doing with the film. So I don't know if this is something you're shooting recently, or this is a blast from the past, or this is a band, or whatever. It definitely has a band kind of a feel to me, a rock and roll band feel. Oh, good to see Leo's there. Congratulations. Thank you for sharing those beautiful images. So Warren, awesome. So Warren is one of these. Can you guys guess which one he is? There you are. Which one are you, Warren? And yep, let us know. Are these shot recently, or are these shot in the past? Smoking in the boys' room, that's a song, I believe. Is that Thin Lizzy, is it? The pretty one. Oh, he's the pretty one, says Tracy. I like that. That's me and the boys in college dressing up. Awesome. That's great. Good picture. Love it. I just love that rock and roll, rock and roll band feel. All right. So, Hannah, are you here? Waiting for got it. I love these bowler hats. Sitting here waiting. This is like going to the DMV. That's the Department of Motor Vehicles. For those of you overseas, that would be your Ministry of Transportation, where you go to renew your driver's license and things like that. All right. Yes, of course you're here. Beautiful. Love the texture. Love the detail, the quality of this, as always. And, of course, the whimsical story. Thank you for sharing that. Marcin, Hope and Sadness is a very powerful image. I just think that, just speaks for itself. Powerful story there. See you later, Chris. And Rod Shelley. I believe Rod Shelley's in the house. Did I see you here? Yes, I did see Rod. Rod is here. And he's doing something here using Poser and creating a fairy. Very cool. I like this. Thank you for sharing this, Rod. I like the moon in the background and the kind of darkness is coming. I like that. Very good. And what do we got here? And in Gail Edwards doing another one of her amazing composites. She's been doing these quite a while, and she likes to do these characters. And so that's Gail. And she also uses 3D. And so, thank you for sharing that. Beautiful piece. And Bill Lagarde. I don't know if you're there. This is throwback to March 30th, 2010. And there's Russell Brown. That's Russell Preston Brown. I happen to be friends with this crazy gentleman. And I say crazy, he's very, very smart. He's the creative director at Adobe, principal creative director. And I've taught workshops with him, and we shot the eclipse together in Casper, Wyoming, and we've taught drones together. He actually is the guy that got me into drones. So this is a Space Odyssey. Odd to see. Very clever. Thank you, William. I see you there. Great piece there. Thanks for sharing that, and thanks for sharing that memory. All right, guys. So I guess that's it for this week. So let me know. Do me a favor. Hit that like button if you got any value out of this. Hopefully we cover some ground, some things that maybe you learned something new. And I know I did. Thank you very much. And yeah, so thanks, guys. So we will be back next week. Do us a favor, once again, hit that like button. Helps us with the YouTube algorithm. And if you haven't subscribed, hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications. You get the videos every Thursday, 1 p.m. We go live. Every Tuesday, very early in the morning, I drop a quick tip or a quick tutorial, which is much more concise than this. This is the time when we go into depth, we deep dive, we experiment, we try things. It's, it's off the cuff. We are ad-libbing here. Ad-libbing. We're basically hanging out and having a Photoshop party. All right, so maybe that should be the name for the new one, Photoshop Party. I don't know, Photoshop Soiree. Oh, getting ideas now. All right, guys. So thanks, Stuart. Thank you, Photomaker, Alistair, John, Michael Stein. Good to see you all. Hannah, of course, Pigeon River, Barney, Zach, Multimedia Jam, Susan, Rod Shelley, Dojo, P. Steelman. These are all regulars. I recognize and remember every name there. Chris Bacon. Thanks, guys. Klaus, good to see you. If I missed your name, I didn't do it on purpose. Jim, good to see you. Polka Dot Studio. All right, you guys are here. You're the cafe crew. Thanks for joining us this week, and we'll see you next week. Thanks.